Diorius Siculus remarked, "It is thought shameful to lie with a free woman without lawful marriage, but with slaves or courtesans no reproach attaches." One can almost hear echoes of similar arrangements on the Muslim rule today. Similar to enslaved women in harems, male captives of soldiers, their fates intertwined with the necessities of empire. Now, as very few empires exist with comparative structure today, or power,
I hardly think that we can be entirely absolved from blame on the imperialistic front.
One wonders why the terror attacks in the Manchestre synagogue could have happened in such a way as they did in comparison to objective obscenities of the past. Perhaps we should ask our new Home Secretary, Sabina Mahmood. If history had a sense of irony, it would be sipping wine on the banks of the Nile while watching the Portuguese carve forts into West African coasts and Muslim merchants scramble to protect centuries of trade. Visiting Southwest Africa recently, I could imagine Herodotus peering across the plains, observing that of all men, Egyptians are the most religious.
Okay, where's it from?
Temple.
Right, get in there. Why is it from the temple?
A sacrifice, mate.
He implied a civilization obsessed with ritual and order, and yet one entirely capable of using religion to manage commerce, control and labour, and justify hierarchies that took ruthlessness to outsiders. Now, in the ancient Muslim world, slavery was very complex back in the day, multifaceted, and in some ways more bureaucratized than Europe can make it, reminding us that even within systems designed to dominate, those who dominate would retain dignity, courage and moral worth, something that has been lost to us in contemporary society today as we face a major immigration crisis in England via the immigration situation. Have we perverted their original ideology? Or have they perverted ours?
Well, I don't know what will be.
The rise of Asian consumerism might just support that. Yet the arrival of the Portuguese on the West African coast in the 15th century dramatically reshaped the landscape, bringing the very first forerunners of the slave trade. Their motives were simple and brutal: profit, gold, and a new supply of enslaved people to fuel European markets.
Here is a purse of monies, which I'm not going to give to you.
One historian remarks, the Portuguese found they could make considerable amount of gold transporting enslaved people along the Atlantic coast of Africa, and Muslim merchants had an insatiable appetite for slaves, which were used as porters on trans-Saharan routes, although we bear the brunt of their legacy in resentment and disgust, with society admonishing every aspect of what is laughingly called today white privilege. The Portuguese were entering a system already complicated, well established, and in many ways regional in scale.
I think in the future all our petty squabbles over Europe will be forgotten. It'll just be one huge state.
It is. I'm going to have to opt out over that one, I'm afraid.
The Muslim traders, Egyptians and North African states had long relied on enslaved labour to sustain urban economies, cultivate crops and fill the ranks of their armies. Religious devotion that oversaw temple taxes and ritual purity coexisted with the commodification of human life. So why aren't we taxing for such religious devotion today? It would be one thing if there were one Muslim temple per UK town, but what we have is an overabundance of architectural obscenities proliferating the streets and clogging up systems of domestic sanctity that have lasted for centuries.
It's very culturally divisive.
Like mad culturally divisive.
Now, no longer are we allowed to pronounce Christianity, but often compelled to be ashamed of it, together with the remembrance of an empire that shaped the world. Such a comparison reflects the strategic conversion that immigrants are opting for on a regular basis around England in order to continue such trade today and allow them to seek permanence, not just trade, however, but in order to claim both benefits that are stripping our country bare, to seek naturalisation. Christianity had shifted from a sacred identity to a purchased commodity.
Alex, we've got shrouds from Turin,
wine from the wedding at Cana, splinters from the cross.
The Portuguese intrusion destabilised existing networks, introducing a new cruelty and on a scale that had not previously existed, whereas English establishments introduced security and stability. The forts on the Gold Coast, like Emina, founded in 1482, became centres of not merely of trade but of enforced labour, coercion and military power, power that evolved through excavation of land masses rather than swift, decisive naval power that are lost to us in Britain today. The Portuguese often intercepted Muslim trading vessels, seized captives and executed those who resisted. These acts did not create the slave trade. They globalised it long before any international human rights got in the way of injecting European military technology that had nothing to do with later British imposition.
And what has the European Convention of Human Rights ever done for us?
Egypt, as a reference point, demonstrates both continuity and adaptation, even as Portuguese incursions cut on slave trade routes connecting the Sahara to the Mediterranean. Diodorus' commentary on sexual and social hierarchies remains prevalent. Social status determined the morality of sexual behaviour, and power dictated those who consented mattered. They want to tackle some of the sexual politics in the 20th century, I think. Muslims, particularly Ottomans, were a race of purity and sexual dominance over their slaves, castrating men and bashing their brains out of newborn babies of the women once they had had their way with them, which is why you will really find a mixed-race Muslim baby today. Herodotus, who watched the Babylonians combine ritual and commerce, would have found this unsurprising. Indeed, he noted that in Babylon, every native woman must, once in her life, sit in the precinct of Aphrodite and have intercourse with some stranger.
Ode to chastity. Built up.
This bleeds into the rape gangs, which are not so much gangs as a form of tribalism. Tribalist interjection into green land we hold dear. This tribalism has swept into our commercial environments, our homes, our political structures. No longer are we able to practice democracy in its truest sense. It now has to be named popularism, in a vain attempt to make it more palatable for postmodernistic mindsets. An Eastern paradigm that is always and always will be totally incompatible with our own. And a social structure cannot survive without consistency. Now, this consistency today is sadly lacking. African captives, both Muslim and non-Muslim, were loaded into ships and sold to European buyers or forced into labour across the Atlantic and Mediterranean. It was always a Portuguese Muslim franchise. Now, despite this, England bears the weight of this travesty. Not only did we outlaw the practice, but, being the first to do so, those around us still carry on with the practice itself. Human traffickers, drug cartels, cultural usurpation, sexual subjugation, the list goes on.
Humphrey, I'm talking about what's right and wrong.
Well, don't let the Foreign Office hear you.
They shape policies and empires and individuals alike. The understanding that these interconnections and listening to the ardent voices of the witnesses is not essential to understanding Africa. It is, in fact, the Muslim world and Europe, but to understanding humanity itself, territorial and dictatorial in nature. Sexual politics, too, are incomparable from trade and power. The enslaved women of Egypt, North Africa and West Africa moved through the multiple social and geographical strata as concubines in Islamic households and domestic labourers as symbols of wealth and prestige. Diodorus' observations that sexual morality was contingent on total status resonates across centuries What is shameful for free women could be neutral or commodified for enslaved women. Now, the LGBTQ contingent could never dream of such nightmares back then, perhaps. Now, it seems Diodorus Siculus was right when he wrote about African sexual norms, maybe.
It's a problem, isn't it? You can have war between races, war between cultures, war between planets. But once you have war between the sexes, you eventually run out of people.
Give us a good clicking.
Shakanaka.